Hello everyone and welcome to the third episode in my React for Beginners tutorial series. Now in this video we are going to be covering a concept called components and props. Now basically, as you could see in the previous episode, we can create components in order to basically pack up pieces of HTML or just pieces of a website and kind of split them up based on components, and we can like create, for example, a navbar component so that the entire navbar can just be one HTML tag that expands out into other HTML. And in this episode, we're going to learn how we can style those using these CSS and using inline styles, and how we can use props and basically pass data into the component. Because you'll notice that in the previous episode, and instead of just keep talking about it, I'm actually going to go ahead and open it first. So just run npm run start to go ahead and start that up, and I'm going to pull up my browser here. So we're gonna go ahead and start up the website, and then I'm gonna open up the app.js file here. I'm gonna close that. So when you run this, you'll notice that when we have these components here, they all have the same data inside. So it all says, this is my component, it can have multiple items, this is my component, blah, 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 and so on. And it says it 4 times. But kind of defeats the purpose of having components if there's no way to customize them. So there is a concept called props in React, which allows us to actually do something along the lines of passing properties to these components, as you would like an h1, for example. You could pass it, it's not really, but you could pass it an href or an src, or a source or a style prop or property, and you could pass it data that way. You can do very similar things to components and say data or name is equal to, and then you could pass it a string, or you could even pass it this bracket here, which you remember, as I keep reinforcing, the bracket in JSX, whenever it is inside this HTML-like syntax or HTML-like code, it means you are injecting JavaScript into the HTML code. So for example, if you had a constant variable called name, and you set it equal to Matthew, well, if I pass in this name here like this, so again, these brackets mean I am injecting JavaScript, and this name means I am injecting Matthew, or I could even say 55, or I could give it a JavaScript object. I could give it anything, because on the other receiving end, it's also JavaScript. So it doesn't need to serialize the data or at all. It'll just pass in the raw JavaScript, even if it's an object or anything. So you can pass anything inside these props, not just strings, as you may be used to with JavaScript, or with vanilla HTML and JavaScript. And name is not defined. So that is what we will be doing with props. And then we will be creating 2 components, and basically they will both be prop components, or maybe not now, but just getting some more practice with the whole concept of components and functional components and so on. So to go ahead and get started, we're going to start off with styling. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this app.css. Of course, we have all of these different ideas. I'm going to go ahead and remove most of these actually, because they are not necessary anymore. These keyframes too. So yeah, these, I'm just trimming all of the unused styles, but essentially this app.css styles everything inside the app.js file. And you can see it here in app.js. We are including or importing app.css on the first line, which is basically making it so that these styles apply to this web page. And only when app is loaded do we get these styles. So it's somewhat like conditional styling, and of course it's like on any HTML page you are loading a given style sheet. And it has the added benefit of actually modularizing our styles, which is a benefit and not at the same time. Of course, if you have all your styles in one, or actually, never mind, sorry, disregard what I said. The styles are actually all chunked into one file in production, but it allows us to modularize them in development, which really helps us with our organization and just keeping everything modularized, which is React's whole point. It wants you to keep little pieces of logic or little kind of functions in your website packaged into single files like this so that it's very easy to work with. So for example, if we just wanted to make our H1s for whatever reason, uh, color red. Again, this is standard CSS, and we get that, which let's do blue. So as you can see, we can change the color or like gray. We can change the color of these things just in standard app.css here. And of course, theoretically, if you wanted global styles, you could add them here in index.css because index.js imports index.css, and this is the root of our project. So of course, we can have global styling, and then we can have modularized or specific styling for certain components. Now, there is also a concept called inline styling, which I'm going to go ahead and remove this H1 here, and we will replicate it in inline. So you can actually have CSS in JavaScript or in this JSX here, and you just give it a style prop like that. And then you pass it, you use these brackets to start off. Remember, one pair of brackets is passing or is injecting JavaScript. Now, the style object itself, let's just say styles is equal to this, is an object in its own right. So you're passing an object in an object. So sometimes people will do this and then do like color uh, gray like this. But you also just, for the purpose of demonstrating this right now, I'm going to go ahead and separate them into a variable. So here, you'll see that, I'm going to remove this really quick, like that. So you'll see we have a variable called const styles, and then it's equal to a JavaScript object. Now, this is how styles are defined in JavaScript. For example, if you wanted to have background color, though, you would actually, if I'm not mistaken, let me just make sure. Background. Yeah. Okay. You actually would define it like background color, like camel case, because camel case is the standard in JavaScript. So of course, if you wanted to do styles like this, you would have to use a camel case kind of syntax here. So I'm going to set the background color to white and then the color to gray, just so it's very obvious. And then here in our H1, we are just going to say style equals, and then this injects JavaScript, and then we can just pass it the styles object. And just like that, you see this hello world, it's only applying to this H1, has a white background, and it has gray text. And of course, you can just take this wholesale and just dump it into here. So you just get, as you can see, an object inside an object, which works just fine. And I can remove this variable. It gives us the same result. I just didn't want to confuse you at first, but again, you just have this object that is being injected into the styles. Now, this is generally discouraged nowadays by React because it actually offers slower performance, at least in the native React. I'm not, or in vanilla React, I'm not sure if React Native has these same limitations. React Native, of course, is the third-party library that allows you to create mobile apps using React-like syntax. That's basically the same with some limitations that with basically some browser features gone because it's mobile. But essentially, it is generally discouraged to do inline styling like that. The one general area where it would be nice is where you actually can do some sort of conditional styling if you would like. It's 50-50. Of course, it's all personal preference, but just know that inline styling carries a tiny performance hit. But if you need to compute your styles in a very complex way, like using JavaScript, because as you saw, we could say let styles equal an object, and we could actually have, conditional code to set styles properties. So we can actually conditionally style our objects based on some JavaScript. But of course, if you don't need to do that, you can just stick to standard CSS, which works just fine. So let's just implement that again, H1. And of course, because there are many H1s, if we want to give this one an ID of hello-world, then of course we can select it by just going hello-world and then giving it that same background color in standard CSS here, and then a color of white or of gray. And of course, we get the same effect again. So there are just many different ways to style our components. Now, I've spent a little bit too long on styling. Props. Props are essentially a way, again, like I said earlier, to pass in properties into our custom components. So if we wanted to have a my component render some text, so we could just say text or whatever we want. We could say data, we could say name, we can give it any prop with any name, except, I'm not too sure about, there's certain reserved words. I think key is one of them, or ID might be one of them, but for the most part, most of the prop names are usable. Um, so a class is also obviously off limits. So um, my component, we could give it a text variable, and then we could say this is this is text, and you'll see here I'm going to go ahead and open up our component file. If you remember from the previous episode, in order to create a component, we just create a new file with the same name of the component, and we define it like this. It's a function. If this does help, you can just say function, an anonymous function, remove the arrow, but I don't like this syntax. I prefer arrow, and many people do as well. So it's just creating a variable my component, which is a arrow function that returns some JSX, and we export it. And it's simple as that to create a component. Now, of course, there is actually a way to access this prop. So we have this text prop here. The way we access it is it's a parameter into the function. So we could say props, props, just like that. And here in our JavaScript, let's go ahead and just console.log it first. So let's go ahead and print props. And you'll see right here, nothing changes except we open up our inspect element here, and we see we get 4 objects. You'll see the first one has a property text, this is text, and 3 have blank, nothing in them. And you'll see you open app.js, and we have 1 component where we gave it a text property and the other 3 where we didn't. Now, of course, we can actually console.log props.text. And in this case, if I hit inspect, you'll see we get this, or let me clear my console first. We get this is, or let me save. We get this is text 1 time, and we get undefined 3 times. Now, the reason for that again is that we passed this is text, and then the other 3 are undefined. So, of course, we can do some sort of check, but in general, usually if we are passing props to all 4, this is text 2, this is text 3, this is text 4. I clear my console first, save, and you'll see we get this is text 2, 3, and 4. So we actually have access to this text here. Now, as a quick exercise in components and just getting used to this whole JSX syntax, I'm going to say text colon, and then here we're going to inject some JavaScript because again, anywhere inside this JSX, we can use brackets to inject JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and say props.text right there, and I'm going to go ahead and save. And you'll see we have text, this is text, text, this is text 2, 3, and 4, and so on. And you'll see right there, we have just started to use props. Notice here in our code, we have 4 very similar components, yet here in the component itself, we can actually differentiate and allow it to render varying or different information. So this is very powerful and is the whole basis of React in essence. So just opening this up again, we're going to quickly work on a card and a nav component because we are running on 13 minutes right now. So don't want to take too much time. I want this to be under 20 minutes. So let's go ahead and delete these my components. We'll be left with this hello world here. And I'm going to actually go ahead and temporarily keep this, but I will delete it soon. This my component.js because it is kind of outdated for us. Now, a quick note of project structure. Generally, you will put your components in a folder called components. It doesn't, I'm going to put them now, starting now. I'm going to drag this in here. We will be removing this thing anyways at some point. And here in app.js, we'll just import my component from /components/my component. That automatically updates if you're using VS Code. So I just save and it's working again. So we are going to create that card component, or let's create a nav, or no, we'll do card.js first. So again, naming, you just name the component, which starts with an uppercase. So instead of camel case, you just do a capital for each beginning of each word. So we'll have card.js, and again, we create that variable called const card is equal to an arrow function. And then down here, we say export default card, just like that. Theoretically, we could actually just export card, and I'll show you how to import that. Wait. Oh yeah, we'll see. So we could just export card or export card like this using standard JS import export syntax. And then of course here we'll return, for example, for now we'll just return a div with, some class card class name is equal to card, and then we will give it some paragraph text test. Eventually, we will be passing in props in order to populate this text here. But notice we can actually just do an export card instead of an export default. The difference between this and JavaScript is as follows. So instead of importing my component like that, we can just import from dot slash components slash card. So in order to import, instead of just saying card like this, the way to use object kind of imports exports is you just need to import it with object syntax like this. Now, there's really no point to doing it if you're just doing one export. That's the point of export default, is if you're only exporting one thing. But if you do actually need to export several components from one file for whatever reason, then you can use this object import. And if I export const new component is equal to another object or another arrow function, theoretically we could export both of these from the same file. So just keep that in mind. And then here in app, we can import them both like this. So, and use two components from one file, but that's not very common. So I'm going to go ahead and restructure this. So export default is the normal structure of that. I'm going to go ahead and remove this component, and we are good to go. So app.js, we import card with a default import instead of using these brackets for an object import. And simply put, we can add the card in like so. We just create card space a slash before you close, and we have this test paragraph, which is inside a div. Now, as you can see, it's all working just fine. Now, we are going to actually want to add some styling. So let's go ahead and add a See, okay, so there are a couple different style or project structures I've seen. I've seen components all be in here and all styles be in a style folder. I have also seen where inside components you'll have a card folder and then you'll put both the JavaScript and the styling. Uh, I don't know which one I like more. I'm going to go ahead and just stick with that for now, actually. So here in components, I'm going to toss card in here. And then I'm going to, once again, I'm moving it down a folder level. So I'm going to have to re-update the import. And then in here, I'm going to just create a card.css file. And we can just say .card since the class, and then we can give it a background, or we could give it a width of maybe 10 rem. Height of 20, wait, no, of 5 rem. This is not good styling. I'm not, I'm just doing this for testing purposes or for video purposes, really. Background color can be white or gray. And we'll just import this. So remember, to import styles, we have to come to the top of our JavaScript and just do an import with this ./card.css. And just by doing that, we have this up and running. Now you can see this card here is actually working. Let's just set the width to, whoops. No, this is actually fine. So light, I'll just do light gray. Um, Light gray is not a color. That's why, because it's all one word. So this is a light gray kind of text, and then we will actually just have black text on the inside. So .card, or so we could just put it here, just color it black. So we have black text. So we see we have this test text right here. And then we can actually pass this in as props, just to give another example. So prop or props. And then remember, props comes in a object form. So I'm going to go ahead and just give it a text of, we'll give it a text of hello world. And then here in our component, if we so choose, we can say const text is equal to props.text, or we can actually use what is called object spread syntax. Just to give you the gist really quick, this is slightly unrelated, but is often used. We have a constant object like props or props2, and we have a bunch of things in it. So like test, test2, test3, and these are all objects. So they have string values, for example. You can actually separate these into separate variables by saying const object is equal to props2. And this is called object spread or object unpacking notation, or object, unpacking notation. which is basically we can say test, test2, and test3. And by doing this, we are basically separating out this object into three variables based on these keys and values inside the object. So same thing you can do with props is you can actually just say const text is equal to props. And then if you add more props, you can just add them here. So if you have a name or like a header, for example, then you can put the div, and then if you have an h1 in here, and you can say header, and then in here, you can put JavaScript again, you can say text. So again, I'm unpacking text and header. Notice there's nothing in the header, which we will add here in app.js. We'll just pass it another property, header is equal to, just like that. This is looking somewhat like standard HTML, and header. We can just say that, and boom, we get very big header. So let's go ahead and upsize our card. Again, this is not good styling, but the point is not styling in this video. It is talking about components. So we see we get this header and then we get this hello world here. So that is how we create a card. And of course, we can literally duplicate it and say header 2, new text, just like that. And now we get a second card with header 2 and new text, just like that. And if we wanted to add margin, we could, but that is not the point. Again, this video is already running up on 21 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and just end it here. I'm going to just cancel this nav component. We did create a card component and we showcased props and styling. So if at any point in this video you were confused, of course, the magic of YouTube, you can pause, rewind, and go as slow as you need to in order to understand these fundamental concepts. They are very important, so I recommend if you were confused to go back and rewatch. If you want to see more content like this, you can check out the React playlist down in the description. I'm uploading every 2 days. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications whenever I post new videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.